There's like a docuseries, Life and Death of Dimebag Darrell. It's like a true crime type of thing, but it has to do with what happened to Dimebag Darrell from Pantera. He wasn't even in Pantera at the time, but I wanted to check this out only because I do remember when he was murdered, and then it just felt crazy to me because Dimebag Darrell was a huge influence on my own playing. When I played in bands, when I used to practice all the time, I used to listen to Pantera a lot, and it was just because of Dimebag's playing. He was so creative. I wanted to check this out. There might be more insight into this than I even heard, because there was a lot going on. There was a lot of rumors and everything else when this happened. And I think Darrell's best friend, which was his guitar tech, was also murdered. It was just literally a guy that had a handgun in a club. So anyway, if you like this type of content, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're on my Twitch, please give me a follow. I'm Dethfender, and let's just get into this, shall we? It's pretty loud, isn't it?
Throughout the 1990s, one of the most critically acclaimed and best-selling metal bands in the world was Pantera, and one of the driving forces behind the band's success was guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott, who co-founded the band along with his brother Vinnie Paul. Abbott was born on August 20th, 1966 in Ennis, Texas, to Carolyn and Jerry Abbott. His older brother Vinnie had been born 2 years prior on March 11th, 1964.
I always thought their last name Abbott. I thought it was a stage name. I didn't realize those were their actual names. I feel dumb about that because I remember seeing Darrell Abbott and I thought, is that really his last name? Like Dimebag Darrell, right? The Dimebag part. Supposedly, you could never afford any more weed than a dime bag. That's what I heard. Anyway, let's keep going.
And the two quickly developed an inseparable bond that would last throughout the rest of Darrell's life.
And they look so much alike, too. I remember a friend of mine looked at his brother Vinny and was like, oh, look at Dimebag. I'm like, no, that's Vinny. That's his brother. He's like, oh, they look so much alike.
Their father, Jerry, was a country music producer who had extensive experience within the industry, and this would be the platform off which both Darrell and Vinny would launch their musical ambitions.
See, I didn't know anything about their father. I didn't know he was a country music star or whatever, or was even in the industry. I had no idea. That's news to me. See what I mean? Like, there's going to be things I'm going to learn from this. And I was a mega fan of Dimebags. I had so many guitar magazines. Any guitar magazine that even mentioned Dimebag Darrell, I would buy. Even the older ones, I'd find them online. Bookstores, sometimes you could order like old guitar magazines. And even some thrift shops that I found some old guitar magazines. I had so many guitar magazines. Some of them got stolen. I still have a lot of them.
At a young age, both the Abbotts found themselves taking a budding interest in music, and after experimenting around with several different instruments,
Look at his hairdo. Wow.
Darrell settled on the guitar while his brother Vinny took to the drums. Both parents were very supportive of their children's music interests, and honestly good for them, because having two preteen boys playing drums and guitar all day sounds like the stuff nightmares are made of. Darrell would practice.
That reminds me of my mom. First of all, I told a story about the rummage sale or porch sale or whatever you want to call it, that buying my first guitar. And then when I started playing guitar and I got this little shitty amp, my mom used to be like, you gotta go take lessons because this is driving me nuts. And then when I took lessons and I started getting better, she still complained, right? So I stopped playing when she was around, or I'd play really quiet, or just play my electric guitar acoustic, right? And then when I started actually getting good, she'd complain, oh, you're playing it too loud, or if we had company over. So she constantly bitched about it. And then a friend of mine started playing drums, and she hated that shit. And then when I moved out of the house, my mom was like, I really miss you playing guitar in the house. I was like, what? You used to bitch and complain all the time. So yeah, parents, yeah, it's hard for them to listen to that racket all the time. I can't imagine having a kid and just having them blaring guitar when they can't even play. It would be nightmare fuel.
This with his brother for hours at a time, drawing influence from legendary guitarists like Tony Iommi, Jimmy Page, and Eddie Van Halen. Like most people starting off with an instrument, Abbott wasn't very
Ace Frehley. He missed Ace Frehley. Another legend gone. R.I.P. Ace Frehley. Dimebag was a huge Ace Frehley fan, as was I. I mean, Kiss was cheesy, but Ace Frehley's guitar playing was so nutty. His solos really fit some of the songs. They made them better, you know?
good at first, but that quickly changed as he poured in hours upon hours
He's got a
jamming with
Rush
his
shirt.
brother. By the age of 14, Darrell had gained some confidence in his abilities and decided to start entering contests. At this point, he was
Oh, yeah. Okay, I heard about this. He entered a guitar contest when he was like 14 to get one of the deans, I believe. It was like the prize. I think that's the reason why I started playing Dean guitars. I think. He's going to say it, but I think that's what it is.
still too young to even drive, and competing against people much older than he was, so the odds of him winning didn't seem too great. But not only did he win, he completely blew everyone else out of the water. In fact, he won so many of these contests that eventually venues would stop letting him enter and
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was only one contest. He played at such a young age and he was super motivated to play. And he had, see, this is another thing people don't realize. When you first start playing any instrument, things that make you better is having other people around you that are better at the instrument and you play along with them. You learn so many things that you wouldn't learn on your own or even with a guitar teacher because it's somebody that's with you all the time, and your brother's playing drums, so your timing is going to be on. Most beginning musicians, their timing is terrible. Also, if you don't know how to tune your instrument, you're going to sound terrible. Main things: timing, taste, how tasteful you play, and how well you're tuned. Those are very important when you first start out. And like a lot of guitarists, when you first starting out, you don't really have an identity. You're looking for how you want to sound. It's very important. Obviously, at a young age, he made his own distinctive style.
just make him a judge whenever he showed up. In 1981, Vinnie was approached by some of his high school classmates named Terry Glaze, Tommy Bradford, and Donnie Hart to form a band. Vinnie agreed on the stipulation that his younger brother Darrell be allowed to join, which the others were reluctant about but eventually agreed to. After floating around several different names, the group eventually settled on Pantera. Abbott took the stage name Dimebag Darrell and shared lead guitar duties with Glaze, though it soon became clear who the superior guitarist was, and
So that's another thing, like, as somebody that grew up playing guitar around other people that played guitar or drums or bass, like, I always hated that whole thing, like, I'm better than you are. You know, like, I'm the lead guitarist and you're the rhythm guitarist. I always hated that whole competition between musicians. It's one of the reasons why I kind of semi quit playing music, especially in bands, because there's like this competitive edge that makes musicians great, but it gets to their head to a point where even if Daryl wasn't like, I'm the better guitar player, I'm going to play lead, if the other guitar player feels like he's not as good as him, like technically, even if he can play other things that Daryl couldn't play, because everybody has their own style, especially the more you play, and nobody plays exactly alike unless you're trying to copy somebody to a T. So the other guitar player may have had better technique in other areas, but may have felt like, oh, his lead playing is smoother than mine. And then they butt heads over dumb shit. And there's the volume war thing where one guitarist is like turning their amp up louder and then everybody else is like, turn it down. And then the other guitar player is like, nope, I'm going to turn my shit up. And then it gets crazy. You don't even realize the shit that musicians do to each other in their own band. It's like self-sabotage.
And Terry went back to just playing rhythm, eventually leaving guitar duties behind altogether and taking over as lead vocalist when original singer Donnie Hart left the band not long after its formation. Now, this original incarnation of Pantera was a far cry from what the band would eventually become.
Wait, is that Rex right there? The bass player? I heard a demo of Pantera when they were a hair metal band. I think this is around the time when they were like doing basically 80s style hair metal.
This was the
Yep.
1980s after all, and glam metal was all the rage. Groups like Motley Crue and Poison were selling out arenas, and that's the kind of music Pantera initially wanted to create. Vinnie and Darrell's father, Jerry, became the band's manager, and under his label they released their first studio album in 1983 called Metal Magic.
Yeah, I heard a song off that. I was like, that's not the Pantera I know. That's another thing too, is any musician that has a parent or an uncle. I know the Bonamasas, Joey Bonamassa and Lemmy, his father. His father had played guitar, and then when his son was like 14, his son played in a band called Bloodlines until he was like 18, I think. And it was basically sons of famous musicians. That's why they called it Bloodline. And they opened up for Leonard Skinner when he was like 14, 15 years old. His father had to fly him out to LA to open up for the band. They opened up for other bands too. They came from like a small area, and it gave Joe like a leg up because his father was already in the industry. So for their father to be in the industry and have his own label, that's even better. And he's like, "Hey, I can manage you guys, and you can put out albums through my label."
Which received a very cold reception at the time. Not to be deterred by the subpar reviews, the band followed Metal Magic up the very next year with an album called Projects in the Jungle, which did slightly better with critics but still received lukewarm praise at best. Something else happened in 1984 though that would make a huge impact on Darrell and Vinnie.
Let me guess. Phil. They'd run into Phil eventually. Obviously. Yeah, let's see what happens.
And ultimately changed the band's trajectory forever. Metallica released their legendary album Ride the Lightning. Not only was Ride the Lightning a smash hit that would go on to be recognized as one of the greatest metal albums of all time, but it would change the way artists viewed the genre forever, and mark the beginning of the
I don't know if it was the best metal album of all time, but it was a good album. I remember when I was younger, we listened to older albums on CD, and we found this album and we played it constantly, driving around, listening to the songs. A lot of great songs on here, but I preferred Metallica's first album, Kill 'Em All, myself, but this did have some really good songs on it. It was when they released And Justice for All is when they started like going downhill, but that's because they lost Cliff Burton. Cliff Burton did a lot of writing. I'm not even going to talk about Metallica. Let's keep going.
end for the glam metal scene. It had a much faster and aggressive sound than people were used to, and it was a sound that many fans around the world became infatuated with, including the Abbott brothers.
The whole speed metal, thrash metal from the Bay Area, California, you had Anthrax. I think they were from New Jersey originally, but you had Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth later on. Who else? Testament. There was a bunch of other bands that kind of fell off. Those are the bands that were the most known from that era. You see the one tour that they had, the Big Four, and it was, what was it, Anthrax, Slayer, Megadeth, Metallica. And then they do a rotation of who would open up and who would close each venue. Every time they went on tour, it'd be a different band opening up and closing.
Both decided they wanted to take this heavier sound Metallica had pioneered, which was dubbed thrash metal, and infuse it with the slower paced melodies that were a cornerstone of the blues-inspired rock of the 1970s.
Yeah, what do they call it? Grindcore? Grindcore, or there's another name too. There's, you know what? It's another thing too. There was a band that came out just before, let's say 5 years before Pantera went in that direction, before Cowboys from Hell, that had a lot of the same riffs, like the way they broke down a song where they had a bridge where they slowed down the tempo to halftime and just made it heavier, or outro where the tempo would go a halftime tempo. And I was like, when I first heard it, I was like, is this a band that came after Pantera? And this kid that knew a lot about all these different underground bands was like, no, no, man, these guys predated Pantera. Pantera stole their sound and yada yada. And I was like, I never heard of them. I don't care. I love Pantera. To me, it was like, yeah, they came first, but it wasn't the same.
70s. They had no way of knowing it at the time, but they were actually creating an entire new subgenre of metal. Their next album, 1985's I Am the Night, saw them bring forth a much heavier sound than they had on previous albums.
Okay, I think I heard their early stuff. One song when they were doing like what you would call now power metal, but whoever was singing had a higher range. It didn't sound anything like the Pantera that you would know now, right? If you listen to any of their albums. But then I heard another song that was heavier with a different singer. It might even have been Phil, I don't know, but I was like, that's Pantera?
Still nowhere near the level of aggression Metallica had on Ride the Lightning, which was largely due to lead singer Terry Glaze's reluctance to embrace the new sound Vinnie and Darrell were going for. Glaze was a glam metal purist through and through.
Okay, yeah, so it was just this guy singing because he had a higher voice than Phil.
And he disagreed with the artistic direction the Abbott brothers were trying to take the band. This resulted in a falling out that saw Terry leave the band at the end of 1985, leaving Pantera without a singer and kind of stuck in limbo. The band would experiment with several different singers, but none of them seemed to fit the musical direction the group wanted to go in. Finally, in 1986, an 18-year-old New Orleans native named
Oh, look at him. Oh my god. Phil, you can tell it's him, but even with that big ass dude that he's got rocking, he looks funny.
Phil Anselmo heard Pantera was looking for a singer and expressed interest in joining the group. Toward the end of the year, he auditioned, and let's just say the chemistry was obvious from the start. Phil had a powerful voice with a ton of range that fit what the band was going for, and he got along great with the other members. This resulted in him being hired as the new vocalist almost immediately, a position he would maintain until the band broke up in 2003. With a new singer secured, Pantera immediately began working on their fourth album, Power Metal, which released in 1988. This album is unique in that it marks the band standing at a sort of crossroads in their career.
This is the album that I'm thinking of. Kind of like a mixture of what you know of Pantera and their later albums, like Cowboys from Hell, and like their glam rock. Because I heard the glam rock one, like one song, and then one song off this album, I believe, and it was a little heavier, but it still had that 80s kind of, sound.
On one hand, they were still holding on to that 80s glam sound, but on the other, it was clear they were now firmly drifting in a new direction. Soon, that new direction would emerge for the world to see, and propel Pantera from a niche southern hair metal band into superstardom. After the release of Power Metal, Pantera took a hard look at whether or not they wanted.
This look right here, I seen this poster or whatever. I didn't even know it was Pantera. Because I'm looking backwards, right? Because I didn't listen to them when they're in their hair metal stage. A lot of people wouldn't even know who they were back then, but this is probably just before they did Cowboys from Hell. And they still had like that look. I mean, the only person that you can recognize is, well, since you know who they are, but like Vinnie Paul, you'd be like, okay, who's that guy there with a mullet?
To maintain the hair metal image they had been rocking for almost a decade. The winds of the music scene seemed to be changing, with thrash metal bands like Metallica, Slayer, and Megadeth enjoying mainstream success. This, coupled with the band's desire to move in a heavier direction, convinced them it was a good time to ditch the spandex and hairspray for ripped jeans and t-shirts. It was at this time that Darrell changed his stage name from Diamond Darrell to Dimebag Darrell, which of course is a reference to a bag of dimes that you take to a bank when you want to deposit them.
I'm pretty sure he's wrong about that. The whole dime, it's pretty sure it has to do with him only being able to afford a dime bag of weed, but yeah, okay, you can go with that.
In a very admirable move, Jerry Abbott stepped down as the band's manager, realizing that if his sons were to achieve their dreams of being rock stars, they would need someone managing them who understood that music scene better than he did. Their new manager was a man named Walter O'Brien who worked for Concrete Marketing, and he would remain their manager for the rest of the band's existence.
That is a big move on their father's part, because think about if their father obviously believed in his two sons and the band, and he was already the manager, and he's like, okay, they're going in a new direction. I believe they can make it in the music business, but they just need a better manager than me. A lot of fathers, they'd want to either be part of it. It's a toss-up because in my experience with not knowing my father probably would have been the type, if he did stick around, he probably would have been trying to cash in, right? But not all fathers are like that. Now, obviously, their father was like, hey, they could make it. They just need somebody else that knows the music scene that they're going in, that direction. That is a big move.
First order of business was to try and get Pantera signed to a record label, which proved a surprisingly tough sell as the band was turned down multiple times. Eventually, though, they caught the eye of two representatives from Atco Records who immediately looked to sign them to a record deal. The group accepted, and in 1989 began working with famed producer Terry Date on their fifth studio album titled Cowboys from Hell, which released in 1990. They say third time's a charm, but in Pantera's case it was the fifth time's a charm, as Cowboys was a smash hit. The band had basically hit the reset button, coming out with a brand new style both in look and sound.
Yeah, but there were a few songs on there that were hair metal adjacent, I would say. Yeah, the playing was a little heavier, but there were some elements of hair metal in there, a little bit. But I'm also thinking of when they did Cemetery Gates for, God, what was the movie? There was a movie, it was on a movie soundtrack. How was the name of that movie? It was like one of those cheesy horror movies or something. There's a bunch of really good bands around the soundtrack, and I cannot think of it. If you know, let me know. Anyway, moving on.
The subject matter of the songs was darker, the music was heavier than anything the group had done before, and their new look more closely resembled a biker gang than the glam rock act they had been just a few years prior.
True.
It is considered by many to be one of the greatest metal albums ever made, and is looked upon by most fans as the quote-unquote real debut of Pantera. In addition to the harder, edgier...
I agree with that. Because the other stuff wasn't Pantera, it was experimenting to get to their sound, right? Because their earlier albums were hair metal stuff. I mean, hair metal already went out by like the late 80s. The bands that were still hanging on were the bands that were the most popular. And if they would have came out with hair metal in the late 80s, they would have had one album maybe, and you never would have heard of them again. They would have been like a one-hit wonder maybe. So they needed to change up their style. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been what they were.
Vocals from Phil and the louder, faster drums from Vinnie, Dimebag's shredding guitar skills were on full display. After years of experimentation, Darrell had finally succeeded in blending the fast pace of thrash metal with the smooth bluesy rhythms of 70s rock, in a new style that would go on to be named groove metal.
Groove metal, grindcore, or well, I guess you'd call it groove metal. It's like a simplistic way of looking at it. But they do have later songs that are more thrashy in parts, and then they do have more groove, so I guess you could call it groove metal. It's more like grinding than grooving.
Despite what this video may have led you to believe so far, this is not a music channel, and I honestly would make myself sound like an idiot if I tried to go into detail here about the ins and outs of Pantera's sound.
Okay, yeah, I can tell, because groove metal, I do like the research this guy put into it. I've never even heard of this channel, but so far he's doing a pretty good job. I think the whole point of this whole thing was more of the crime that happened, not so much the band, right? He's just giving the information about where they came from, where they went, and then how it got to the true crime part, right? That's what I'm thinking. Because we're about halfway through.
To support the album's release,
What the hell is this? Some audience member jumping up on stage.
Pantera kicked off a massive 2-year tour with nearly 200 stops, and would go on to tour for most of the 1990s. Dimebag was often accompanied on the road by his longtime girlfriend Rita Haney, who he'd been in a relationship with since 1984. But despite being a certified rock star at this point, he never let the success go to his head. Dimebag was always gracious and appreciative of his fans. He would often take the time to sign autographs and pose for pictures with them, which
that is one reason why not only just his playing, but him and his brother are both really modest for being, as successful as they were. They never were like, oh, we're the greatest or whatever. Phil, on the other hand, he was always like, oh, I'm in the greatest band, we're the best, we're this, we're that, we're blah, 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 blah. Phil had some issues, though. I mean,
in retrospect makes the fate he would meet years later all the more tragic. Throughout the rest of the 90s, the band would continue its grueling slate of tours, only stopping to record new material, such as their 1992 album Vulgar Display of Power and the 1994 album Far Beyond Driven.
Both great albums, by the way. I love both those albums. Far Beyond Driven, I played so many times. Vulgar Display of Power, played so many times. There's so many good songs on both albums.
Like most rock stars, Pantera partied pretty heavily while on tour, with Darrell being known as a very heavy drinker. His drink of choice, of course, being the now infamous Blacktooth Grin, a drink.
Oh, yeah. I think him and Kerry King of Slayer, Zach from Ozzy, they used to hang out all the time and get drunk. Those three must have been crazy.
Invented by Dimebag that is a blend of Crown Royal, Seagram 7, and the tiniest little bit of Coke just to give it its trademark dark color. So basically it was a shit ton of whiskey with a drop of soda. These years would prove to be Pantera in their prime, with all the albums released in that span receiving critical acclaim and commercial success. The personal relationship between the band members was also at an all-time high, with an almost brotherly bond between them all that seemed unbreakable. Sadly, as with many famous bands throughout history, this wouldn't last. No. When Pantera returned to the road in 1995, the band members noticed Phil was acting a bit different. He was distancing himself from the others and would often spend his time alone instead of partying with the guys like he had so often done in the past.
Yeah, because he got into heroin. I think he had an injury, and he started with painkillers at first, like opiates. I don't know how he got into heroin, but I mean, it wouldn't be very difficult for him to be on the road to get it, right? It really wouldn't.
The rest of the band originally wrote this off as Phil letting his rock star status go to his head, but the reality was much darker than they could have imagined. The year prior, Anselmo had been diagnosed with a back injury that had been caused by the extreme physical exertion he would put himself through performing on stage. Doctors told him he could get corrective surgery if he wanted, but this would result in him being unable to perform for possibly a year or more. Something Phil was adamantly against. So instead, he took the much less productive path of self-medication, initially with alcohol and eventually moving on to heroin, which may have helped ease his back pain, but resulted in the not-so-insignificant.
I don't even know if I could show this. Can I show this? But the thing is, it's like, with any drug, I know, because I end up becoming a heroin addict myself at one point in time. And with any drug, yeah, at first you think it's helping you, right? Because I self-medicated. You think it's helping, and then one day it's
Side effect of becoming a heroin
making
addict.
everything worse.
Anselmo's addiction came to a head in 1996 when he overdosed after a show in Texas and his heart stopped beating for 5 minutes before he was eventually resuscitated. This incident revealed Phil's addiction to the rest of his bandmates, who were completely blindsided by it since the singer had gone through such great lengths to hide what was going on.
Typical. I just got to say that that'd be a hell of a surprise for everybody to be like, you're doing what? Everybody else is just drinking. Well, they drink a lot. I mean, drinking can be bad too. Don't get me wrong. It's just easier to get, right? Heroin, on the other hand, can be easy to get too, but it's not exactly legal.
Dimebag's girlfriend Rita Haney said that Vinnie and Darrell were embarrassed by Anselmo's actions, and this incident formed a rift between the Abbott brothers and Phil. Despite these problems, the band continued touring together for the remainder of the 1990s, but the tensions between Phil and the Abbott brothers only seemed to grow. In addition to his drug problem, Anselmo was known to say outrageous things on stage that would often.
Oh my God, yes. Oh, that's another thing. I forgot about that. It's unbelievable. I don't even think he knew what planet he was on. And then he also would stop. He'd be like, stop playing, stop playing. If you motherfuckers don't start moving, we're gonna leave. This is crazy shit.
Draw negative attention to the band, something he still seems to have a problem with to this day.
Oh, jeez.
Dimebag, Vinnie, and bassist Rex Brown very much didn't appreciate this, as they wanted Pantera to be known more for their music rather than controversy. Additionally, Phil began taking long breaks from the group and focusing more of his energy into side projects, such as the band's Down and Superjoint Ritual.
The first Down album was pretty good. Second one was okay. It was almost like he was like trying to distance himself from the other guys. This is what happens with a lot of addicts, okay? I'm just gonna put it out there. Addicts don't want to be around somebody that's trying to help them, because people that are trying to help them are gonna be like, you gotta stop using, you gotta get yourself together. You know, they're trying to help you out. Addict doesn't want to hear that. Addict wants to hang out with people that are gonna, support their habit. This is how it works. A lot of families fall apart like that. These guys were like a family unit. I don't know if Rex was using, but Rex took Phil's side, because with Down, Rex went with Phil. I think Superjoint Ritual, Rex was with Phil. And then every side project that I can think of, I think Rex was with Phil. So it's like they took sides. It was like Darrell and Vinnie are over here, and Rex is over here with Phil. It's like there's a big rift that kind of split.
At first, the other band members were fine with this, as Anselmo was capable of balancing these side projects with his responsibilities to Pantera. But as the 90s wore on, that became less and less the case. It became very common for Phil to take long breaks from the band. And while they still managed to maintain a robust touring schedule, it was harder for them to get Phil to sit down and make new music, something that bugged Vinnie and Dimebag immensely. For their 1996 album, The Great Southern Trendkill, Anselmo actually recorded his vocals separate from the rest of the band at Trent Reznor's studio in New Orleans.
Ooh, see, this is something I didn't know. I did know that they weren't in the same facility, but at this point in time, the Abbott brothers See, now I can say that with confidence. The Abbott brothers had their own studio, and they had like a big live room where they put the drums in and they would just jam on parts, and then they would record a bunch of stuff, and then they'd have somebody come in and mix the instruments together, and then they just send the mix to another studio where Phil could sing on it. I didn't know it was Trent Reznor's studio.
Would be 4 years before Pantera released another album, 2000's Reinventing the Steel, which would prove to be their final studio release.
That album I didn't like as much. You could tell that they weren't as tight as a band on the album. There's a couple of good songs on there, but I thought it was mostly like music wise, it was a good album. Guitar wise, there's a lot of great guitar parts, a lot of cool time changes and stuff. It had a whole different vibe to it, which I think after this album, Damageplan was the project that the brothers got into. Phil and Rex went. God, I don't even know what band they went to at that point in time. There's so damn many of them that he was
Would
part of.
continue to tour for the remainder of 2000 into 2001, and would play their last show together at Yokohama, Japan on August 28, 2001. A few weeks later, the September 11th attacks took place, and according to Vinnie, Phil contacted him in the aftermath and indicated that he wanted to take a break from touring for a while. This was something Vinnie and Dimebag agreed upon. However, despite saying this, Anselmo would continue to tour with Superjoint, Ritual, and Down just as rigorously as he had with Pantera.
Oh wait, yeah, because Rex went with him everywhere. I think there was a point in time where Phil started gaining weight too, right? He was like all bloated. When he actually did quit drugs, he gained weight. That happens to a lot of people.
Joined in Down by bassist Rex Brown. Anselmo later stated, though, this wasn't how things happened, and described his version of the conversation as more of a mutually agreed upon hiatus. Regardless of who's right here, the whole ordeal left a sour taste in the Abbott brothers' mouths, but they still held out hope that eventually Phil would rejoin them. Unfortunately, that never happened, and in 2003 it was announced that Pantera had officially broken up. Following the band's breakup, Dimebag was heartbroken and very dejected. He had poured his soul into this group for over 20 years, and felt completely blindsided by their separation.
At this point in time, Dimebag, I think he was playing like Randall solid state amps, but I think when he went to Damageplan, he started playing on Crank, which I was going to buy a Crank at one point in time until I realized that just the amp head alone was like $2,500. And I had a half stack I could use with it, but I didn't have that kind of money. Even working full time and doing construction jobs on the side, I didn't have that kind of money.
Salt to the wound, the relationship between him and his once good friend Phil Anselmo had deteriorated drastically following the band's breakup. This soon turned ugly, as Anselmo would often make public statements hurling insults at Dimebag and Vinnie, as well as blaming them for Pantera's breakup, which inevitably divided the fan base over who was at fault. Initially, the Abbott brothers considered trying to reform the band with a new singer, but given Phil's—
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. That's how Damageplan came about, I believe, because they were like, well, we could just get a new singer to fill in. They needed a new bass player as well, and that became Damageplan, if I remember correctly.
Attitude toward them at the time, they thought it was very likely this would result in a lengthy legal battle over who had the rights to the Pantera brand. So instead, they decided the best direction would be to start a new group entirely. They recruited former Halford frontman Patrick Lockman as the vocalist, as well as bassist Robert Kakaha, who had the ridiculously cool stage name of Bobzilla, and eventually settled on the name Damageplan. Between August of 2003 and January of 2000,
I did not like this album. Looking back at it, I mean, I haven't heard the songs on this album in so long. I tell you the truth, I couldn't name one of them. Because it reminded me too much of like the sound of Pantera. It's Pantera's sound, but with a different bass player, and a different singer. Damageplan basically was Pantera 0.20. I don't know. It didn't work for me. I know people that loved that album, but every time I tried to listen to it, I couldn't. It wasn't too much longer after that when the whole thing happened, right? A couple years
4, the
later.
group recorded songs for their debut album titled Newfound Power, which was released in February of 2004. It featured several prominent artists such as Slipknot singer Corey Taylor and Ozzy Osbourne's guitarist Zakk Wylde.
Damn, I didn't even know. Did I know that? For the life of me, I don't remember. I may have known that at one point in time, which is ironic now because now Zakk is playing in Pantera with Phil and Rex and another drummer that I don't know. There was a lot of controversy over that.
But got a very cold reception from critics and didn't make much of a splash commercially. As disappointing as this was for Dimebag and Vinnie, they were happy just to be making music again, and even more happy to be going back on tour, which kicked off not long after Newfound Power's release. The venues they played at were a far cry from the sold-out stadiums they found themselves in just a decade ago. But for Dimebag this didn't matter, as for him it was all about the love of the music. Tragically, this love of performing and the love he had for the millions of fans he'd gained over the years would be the very thing that killed him. Nathan Gale was a native of
Yeah, here we go. You know what? This reminds you of, like, when you see those movies, the beginning story, it's inspiring, like a true life type of movie that inspired by real life events. And you get about 3/4 of the way through and you know the tragic part is coming up. And you're like, oh God, this is the word, this is the part. But I didn't know much about the guy that did the act. I just know that how it happened.
Marysville, Ohio, who had what one would call a troubled life. Gale had suffered from several mental health issues from the time he was a young child, and was enrolled in special education during his time in grade school. And these symptoms only got worse as he got older, earning him the not-so-affectionate nickname of Crazy Nate from his friends. Nathan began listening to Pantera in high school, when a friend loaned him a copy of Vulgar's Display of Power. Nathan would often listen to it over and over and over again. In fact, for about 2 years straight, it was all he would listen to.
God, me and my friend were like that for like a year. So all we listened to was the 3 first albums, Pantera, constantly.
Inspired by the album, Gale began to write music himself, but
Oh,
according to
really?
those who knew him, could never muster up the courage to actually sing the lyrics out loud, even when his friends encouraged him to. Nathan
I knew a lot of people that were like that. They wanted to be musicians. I actually had a friend that was like, he wanted to be a singer. We were young, but I had already played in bands, and I was like, well, if you're embarrassed, because we had the room where we recorded in, and we had the vocal booth that we made as kids. We had a live room and then the vocal booth. I had this little shitty digital 4-track recorder type of thing, and I was like, here, we'll make up some lyrics, and you can sing along to my guitar riff. And we did it. And my mom, I remember, she went ballistic, but we tried. But it's not easy for everybody. I had stage fright really bad the first few times, but this guy obviously had issues, and I'm pretty sure I remember the reason why he wanted to do what he did, but let's see what happens here.
Nathan's fanaticism for the band quickly turned from obsessive to outright bizarre. He would tell friends that he befriended the group at a show and that they agreed to come play a concert for him at a friend's birthday party.
No.
And the reason he knew this was hidden messages inside of the CD sleeve.
Oh my God. Oh, I didn't know that. I thought the reason why he did it is because he was an obsessed, crazed fan that believed the brothers were the reason why Pantera fell apart, because of him listening to one of the interviews of Phil talking shit about Dimebag. That's what I thought it was. But for him to like literally think that the sleeve of the CDs, for anybody that doesn't know what the sleeve is basically where you open up the CD pack and then like there's all those words and stuff in there and pictures and photos, whatnot, and then it opens up and they call it a sleeve. And it would have like who wrote what song, and the band would have like thanks to and all that type of shit. Yeah. Anyway, they don't have that anymore because now you can just download everything.
Delusions became even more surreal as Gale would later start complaining that Pantera had stole lyrics and guitar riffs from him, and that he was in the process of suing the group. He eventually took this yet one step.
Oh my god, this guy was fucked. I remember talking about the other band that this guy told me was like the band that started that type of sound, grindcore sound, and Pantera stole their sound. Now this guy's talking about the same type of thing, but he doesn't have any music released. It's crazy. At least that other band that I was talking about, I don't remember their name, but I had an actual album out.
Further, and told people the band was trying to steal his identity. After high school, Nathan enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, but was discharged only a year after enlisting due to military psychiatrists diagnosing him with schizophrenia.
Oh my god. Well, yeah, you can tell that because if he's looking at a CD cover or the sleeve or whatever, and he's like seeing hidden messages for him, it's pretty obvious the guy's got some issues. And I'm not down anybody that has issues. I have mental health issues, but I've never had schizophrenia. But as far as I know, it is treatable. You know, if it's diagnosed, it's treatable, but you have to take your medication in order to be treated, and you have to go to therapy, and you have to see, you know what I mean? Like, there are steps, and sometimes people are diagnosed with certain things and they just pretend like it's not real.
He was given medication for his ailment and moved back home to Ohio
No, I
where he
haven't
got a
seen
job
this.
as a mechanic, though his obsession with Pantera never ceased. By 2004, his friends had begun to distance themselves from him due to his ever-increasing bizarre behavior.
See, there's so many things I didn't know about the killer. I didn't know all this shit. Obviously, this guy did a lot of research. I mean, because so many things that I didn't know. I heard a lot about what happened, but I didn't know much about the guy that did it.
It was believed he had stopped taking his medication around this time, and as a result, he had become more unstable than he'd ever been. In the months leading up to December 2004, they said Nate would often rock back and forth and talk to himself, and had even begun talking to an imaginary dog that he believed was with him all the time.
My dog is real, guys. No, but seriously, there are a lot of times where there are people out there that have issues where, I was going to say it, they have to be in some kind of psych ward. It's difficult to put a loved one in a facility, especially somebody that's unstable and they're talking to people that aren't there. I don't know. There's a whole thing about that where should somebody be put in a facility or not? Are they dangerous to themselves or other people? If they are, they should be put in facility. A lot of states don't even have facilities anymore unless you're criminally insane, which obviously what happened.
He also continued to maintain that the lyrics on Vulgar Display of Power had been written by him and that he was owed money by Pantera. Despite this disturbing behavior, Gale was thought to be harmless by those who knew him.
See, that could be like a bias. If your friends, if your family members have issues like that and you're like, oh, they're harmless. But you never know the extent of what somebody will do, especially if they think, for instance, a band owes them money because they wrote the songs that are on the band's album, or the band breaks up and then if they're acting strangely and talking to people that aren't there, like, you never know what could happen. And he went to the Marine Corps and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he's not taking his medication. He's acting unstable. People are saying he's a little weird, but he's harmless.
Was weird and uncomfortable to be around, but apart from the occasional angry outburst, he had never gone so far as to harm anyone. On December 8th, 2004, though, that would all change. Damageplan was making an appearance at the Alrosa Villa nightclub in Columbus, Ohio. It was a small venue that wouldn't have drawn someone like Dimebag Darrell during the height of Pantera's popularity. But for him and Vinnie, it was the perfect kind of venue to play in. A small little hole in the wall where they got to be right near the fans was just the kind of thing Darrell loved.
Another thing I want to say is like the venue there, as far as I heard, didn't really pat people down. I've been to concerts where security patted everything down. They wouldn't allow certain things in. If you went inside a venue, they would be like, you can't bring a backpack, you can't bring this, you can't bring that. Obviously, anything sharp. But then again, it could be because of after things like this happen, right? Things change. I'm sure in the 70s, people could just walk right in, right? You have a ticket, okay, walk in. I'm just assuming, I don't know. I wasn't around then, but I'm just saying.
Unbeknownst to him at the time, Nathan Gale was waiting outside hoping to catch Dimebag as he was coming off the band's tour bus. In his pocket was a loaded Beretta 9mm, which he'd intended to use to finally take vengeance on the members of Pantera who, in his mind, had stolen his song lyrics and were continuing to try and steal his identity.
See, I didn't know that. I thought it was something completely different. That's what I heard. Did not know that. That is wild. This is even worse because I thought it was an obsessed fan that had some issues that just listened to Phil's rhetoric about Dimebag, and because Phil and Rex never got attacked, right? Obviously, they're not all together as a band, but still. Uh,
Months earlier, he had rushed the stage at a Damageplan show in Cincinnati, Ohio, but was stopped by security before he could get close to the band. He was unarmed, and apart from kicking over some musical equipment as security removed him from the building, hadn't caused any harm, so the incident was barely a blip on the group's radar.
I didn't know that either. I thought this was the first time he ever tried doing anything, but he already went to confront them without a weapon. And I've been to a lot of concerts, and I know people that have been to a lot of concerts, and I know a lot of people that have played a lot of concerts, and I've played some local shows myself. We never had anybody drunk, high, or otherwise try to get on stage and trash equipment, even in bigger venues. That's not just a blip under the radar. That's an issue.
Nathan's plan this time around was to ambush Vinnie and Dimebag as they came off the tour bus, under the guise of a fan asking for an autograph, much like Mark David Chapman had done to John Lennon on the exact same day 24 years earlier.
Oh my god. Yeah, I didn't think of that either.
He was too late, however, as the band had already gone inside and began setting up for their show. Nathan decided to change his plan and waited outside while the opening acts performed. During this time, the club's security took notice of him hanging around, but wrote him off as a straggler just trying to get into the show without a ticket. As Damageplan took to the stage and began their introductions, Gale scaled a wooden fence around the back of the club and made his way into a side door that was unlocked.
Oh my god. Security must have been terrible in this place. Like, for instance, I live right down the street from, I'm not going to say what theater it is, but there's a theater and they have side doors that are always locked. And they also have where they bring all the equipment back and forth, and like the acts will go in the side door, right? And it's like a load in, basically. And they don't let anybody, I mean, you can walk by there, but they don't let anybody get in there. If you just start walking in there, you're either walking out or you're going to be tackled. That's not something you can just do. and they have a side door. Like all the side doors they have on the building are connected. There's one that's connected to like a space where they have food and beverage, snacks, shit like that they put in certain areas for different events. Another one that goes upstairs. Another one that goes inside. But those are all locked pretty much all the time unless there's people there. And they have the load-in group that they're part of like a union. And then whatever band that goes there that brings their own equipment, they're also part of a union. But they have security there as well. So they're all bunched together, and it makes sure the doors are all, even if they're open, there's somebody right there inside. So as soon as the door opens up, the person's right there.
Started walking towards the stage. Security spotted him immediately and began following him, but didn't view it as an emergency as they were still assuming he just wanted to sneak into the show without paying. Suddenly, as Damageplan began playing their first song of their set list, Nathan rushed the stage and pulled the pistol out of his coat pocket.
He shouldn't even have got inside. He shouldn't have been able to even get in the damn building like that from a side door.
Before anyone realized what was going on, he ran up to Dimebag and fired 4 shots into his former hero. 3 of them struck Darrell in the head and a 4th went through his hand. He collapsed.
Oh man.
On the floor and died instantly at the age of 38. Initially, the crowd thought this was some sort of elaborate stunt.
Seeing part of the video where they didn't show what happened, but you could hear after the shots, he's probably going to talk about it, but the roadie that was best friends with Darrell was like, "You shot my friend," and then Vinny's like, "You shot my brother," and then they tried rushing the guy, and they both got shot. I think the roadie got killed.
Some of them actually cheered. Gale then turned and fired a shot at Damageplan's tour manager Chris Paluska, striking him in the chest before the band's head of security Jeffrey Thompson rushed Nathan and tackled him. During the struggle, Thompson was shot 3 times and would eventually die of his wounds.
Jesus. I know a lot of people got killed, but
by this point, a full-blown panic had started amongst the audience, as Patrick Lockman screamed into the mic for someone to call 911 and jumped off stage to escape the shooter. A club employee had ran out of a rear exit when the first shots were fired and placed a call to 911 from a nearby payphone. Police rushed to arrive on scene, but inside the chaos continued. Gale stood up and realized during his melee with Thompson he had lost his glasses, making it harder for him to see. At this point, a fan attending the show named Nathan Bray had jumped on stage and was attempting to help the fatally wounded Dimebag. Gale turned and pointed the gun at him, firing a shot through his chest and killing him.
Oh man. So he's just killing everybody. He don't care. Jeez. Oh yeah, he's perfectly fine. You know, he's a little weird or whatever, but he's harmless. So that's what I mean. A family member or friends of somebody that has any kind of mental health issues, for them to say that type of stuff, it's from an area of love that they don't want to believe that, right? They don't want to believe that somebody could do something like this, but anybody could if they're not in the right headspace. Even like somebody that's high or drunk, if they're pushed beyond a certain point or something happens, it's traumatic in their life, they could do something crazy. I'm not saying just kill random people, but people are unpredictable, and this is crazy.
After which the gun ran out of ammunition. As he fumbled around to reload, a club employee by the name of Aaron Halk attempted to subdue the much larger Gale and was shot 6 times, which killed him.
Oh my God. He even had time to reload.
Instantly. A stagehand named John Brooks then rushed Nathan and was shot twice in the leg before being taken hostage. As all this was happening, Ohio police had rushed the building, including Officer James Nagameyer, who made his way into the club through a rear entrance armed with a Remington 12-gauge shotgun.
Well, probably the same side door that the guy just walked right in without the security even stopping him.
Sneaking up behind them and realizing he had the element of surprise and that another life would likely be lost if he didn't act, the officer took aim at Gale from behind Vinnie Paul's drum set and fired a shot through Nathan's face, killing him instantly.
Oof. Shotgun to the face. Definitely couldn't show that. This whole thing's wild. I think there was other things that did happen though. The one roadie was like, he killed my best friend when he rushed him, the stagehand guy, because he was considered like the guitar tech, I think. They usually call him a roadie or whatever, but he worked on Dime's guitar, tuned it and everything. And I think also Vinnie Paul said something like, "You killed my brother," because I think he got hit when somebody else got shot and the bullet went through that person. Like more members were grazed by bullets besides the people that were killed. I'm pretty sure.
In total, the entire incident lasted just under 5 minutes. 5 minutes that felt like an eternity for those involved. By the end, 5 people, including the killer, lay dead, and a legion of fans who adored Dimebag would be asking why. In the immediate aftermath,
God, you can see people like that are there going up and just seeing it and just crying.
of the shooting, many speculated that Gale's motivation was anger at Dimebag for Pantera's breakup.
See, that's what I heard. See, that's obviously, it was probably a rumor then. That's what I mean. Like, sometimes you hear rumors and people, the whole saying fake news, but I heard a bunch of different things, and some of it I thought was confirmed.
This started largely because of a rumor that when Nathan had pulled out his gun, he screamed, "This is for breaking up Pantera," before shooting Darrell.
Oh my God. I was going to work, right? And I was driving, and the DJ on the radio station, I was listening to the radio station, just happened to say that Dimebag Darrell was shot. And I like pull over to the side of the road, and they played Cemetery Gates. But he also explained that the shooter was rumored to have said the exact same thing. And then a rumor was out that the shooter, because a lot of people didn't know, hear rumors at the time that there was a lot of people, what the hell was going on as far as motivation. So it was a lot of rumor and assumptions. And
However, this was refuted by people who attended the show, as they said it was impossible to hear anything Gale might have said due to how loud the music was.
Good point.
Also, just a few weeks prior to the shooting, Phil
oh God, I forgot about this too. This is the reason why Phil was not allowed to go to the funeral. Right here. Pretty sure.
Anselmo had done an interview with the magazine Metal Hammer, in which he stated that Abbott needed to be, quote, beaten severely. This caused many in Dimebag's inner circle to hold a grudge against Phil for several years, including Vinnie, who refused to speak to Anselmo for the rest of his life. Rita Haney also went so far as to say she would, quote, blow Phil's brains out if he tried to attend Dimebag's funeral.
Yeah, I heard that because she was pissed. And there was actually a guitar magazine that had an interview with Dimebag's girlfriend, wife. I don't know if they ever got married. I don't think they did. But they were together for so long, you might as well say that they're husband and wife. But she explained her side of things, and that I guess Darrell and Vinnie were both heartbroken, and they blamed Phil for the band falling apart because of his addiction and everything. And then Phil was trying to say to them, like, I'm clean now, but I just want to move on, some shit like that. But he would relapse and then he would get into an interview and say the craziest shit. She was just hurt and upset, and she probably had to aim that aggression toward Phil, but she probably also felt hurt anyway because they were all friends, and then they felt betrayed that Phil was like using behind everybody's back and then saying crazy shit about everybody, and then just, compiled grievances, basically.
Though, unlike Vinnie, she seems to have reconciled with Anselmo in the years since.
Oh, I did not know that either. I did not know that.
As far as the official investigation was concerned, no connection was found between the killing of Darrell and the breakup of Pantera, with police stating the only thing they could find as far as motive was Gale's delusional belief that Pantera had stolen his lyrics and were attempting to steal his identity. Tributes came pouring in from across.
Oh my god, like, really, honestly, stealing his identity? Stealing his lyrics, stealing his identity.
The globe for the fallen guitar icon, with many fans making the journey to Ohio over the next several weeks to pay homage out front of the club where Darrell had been killed. Thousands more attended the public memorial held in his honor, and Dimebag was buried in a casket decorated in Kiss iconography, which was donated by Gene Simmons. He was laid.
There was a guitar magazine that had Darrell and Ace Frehley, and they were both, like, it was an interview, and they're interviewing both of them, and Dimebag was saying how much of an influence that Ace Frehley was in his own playing, and it was a really cool interview. I think I have the guitar magazine somewhere. I think Ace was even at the funeral. Not 100% sure. It's so long ago, now that I think of it, 2004. Jeez. Damn.
To rest in a plot next to his mother, who had died of cancer in 1999. A couple of months prior to his murder, Darrell had fulfilled a lifelong dream of finally meeting.
That's right. Yeah, and he also met Eddie. Eddie Van Halen was another big influence of
his hero, Eddie Van Halen, and asked if he could get a replica of the famous black and yellow striped guitar Eddie would often play. In a moving tribute to the fallen guitarist, Eddie took the original guitar and had it placed in Darrell's casket, remarking, quote, "Dimebag was an original, and only an original deserves the original." To this day...
Dude, I didn't know that either. I didn't know that. See, there's so many things in this. The guy that did the documentary, this channel, I'm going to give it a like. Obviously, you should too. This true crime, like, normally I don't watch true crime programs at all. It's not really my thing, but I seen that they're talking about the incident, and I was a huge Pantera and even bigger Dimebag Darrell fan. As a guitarist, he was a big influence on my playing when I played all the time, like, and I seen this, I was like, this would be something, because there's so many things I didn't know up until now. There's so many, like, intricate parts. Like, the guy was saying he's not a musician, but obviously he did the research into the behind the scenes stuff that I didn't know. There's so many rumors and stuff that I didn't know the truth behind, like, the person. I didn't even know anything about the guy. I just heard that he used to be a Marine. That I remember that, and a few other things that I already mentioned.
Dimebag Darrell is recognized as one of the greatest metal guitarists of all time,
True.
whose music still inspires artists across the world.
True.
And while he may no longer be with us, his legend will live on forever.
True. Okay, so Crime Spot. Okay, this is a pretty good channel. I'm gonna check out to see if he has anything else on any other musicians, anything like that, for a later reaction. But this is pretty good.
History or mysterious stories from around the world, consider subscribing so you can be updated whenever we post something new. This is Crime Spot. and thank you for watching.
That was good. Again, that's not something I normally would watch myself, but I just happened to see it because I was looking at other documentary series that had musicians, and I was like, seeing one with Randy Rhoads, and I was gonna look at that one. That's the original one. In my back of my mind, I was like, "Oh, check out that one." But then I remember I wanted to check out the Dimebag Darrell. There were a lot of things I didn't know. There was a lot of rumors that I heard, and it happened so long ago that I kind of remembered things as he was talking about 'em. Like the interview with Phil, like weeks before Dime was shot, and I didn't realize that Daryl's girlfriend, wife, actually was on speaking terms with Phil Anselmo like years later, like many years later. But then again, it does make sense in a way because like they did get Pantera back together, and the fact that what was it, 2021 or 2022, when they were talking about getting them back together, or when they got back together, I thought it's kind of weird that Phil is in the group because, yeah, both brothers had passed. I'm pretty sure that there was a lot of people that were involved in ownership of music and things like that, that there would have been some kind of court battle, but there really wasn't, as far as I know. Anyway, Dethfender, if you like this type of content, please like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching on Twitch, please give me a follow. All right. Talk to y'all later. Peace.